Check audio. Check one, two.
Testing audio check 1 2.
Good evening, Charlie. Council Fortini checking in.
Good evening, Councillor Fortini. You're coming through loud and clear. Councillor Tour, could we check your mic, please?
Yes, this is Gurpatav checking in. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Councillor Vicente logging in.
Hi, Councillor Bertini, it's Tammy from the clerk's office. Was that you doing a mic check?
Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, coming through clear.
Check audio. Check 1, 2. Testing audio. 1, 2, 3.
Good evening, Councillor Vicente. I believe that was you.
Yes, I tested.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Hi, Councillor Brar, it's Tammy from the clerk's office. Can you unmute your mic and test your audio for us, please?
Good evening, Councilor Barr.
Thank you, you're coming through clear.
Thank you. Good evening, it's Councillor Santos checking in.
Hi, Councillor Santos, you're coming through clear. Thank you.
check audio, check 1, 2, testing audio.
Hi, Counselor Maderos, it's Tammy from the clerk's office. Can you unmute your mic and test your audio for us, please?
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, you're coming through clear.
Welcome, everybody, to the Planning and Development Committee of Monday, April 8th. I will perform the roll call. Deputy Mayor Singh.
He's absent.
Not present. Councillor Santos.
Present.
Councillor Vincente.
He's online.
Councillor Brar.
Present.
Councillor Keenan. Not present. Councillor Maderos.
Present.
Councillor Fortini.
Present.
Councillor Tour.
Present.
Councillor Power. Mayor Brown is not present. Before we begin, and before I kick it over to the clerk's office, I'd ask everybody to take out their phones, make sure they are either turned off or on an inaudible. We have a lot of delegations here tonight, and it's pretty disruptive, not only coming up here for the first time, but then having a phone go off or anything go off while that delegation is happening is very difficult. So I'd ask you to turn those phones off or put them on an inaudible mode. I'd appreciate that. I'd like to move it over to the clerk's office to announce any of the additions to the agenda before approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. We did distribute a revised agenda at 6:35 p.m. today, and the changes that are reflected on that agenda from the original publishing are with respect to item 6.1 re 5.1, delegation number 7 has withdrawn. There's an added presentation for delegation 11 and a revised presentation for delegation 5. With respect to item 6.2 re 5.4, we have one added delegation number 2 with a presentation. With regard to item 6.3, We have no further additions there. Item 7.1, a revised presentation. Item 7.2, a revised attachment, number 7. And item 11.1, re 5.4, we have added correspondence. Item 11.2, re 7.4, we have added correspondence. And item 11.4, re 7.1 and 7.2, we have added correspondence. Thank you. Those are the changes from the original.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I also have a new item that'll be under 9.1, be a staff presentation on an update of the Brampton Plan. That's going to Regional Council very soon. So staff are here to present on that. I'll look to the board to see if any members have anything they'd like to add, remove, delete. Seeing none, I do want to also let everybody know that during the week of March 18th, 2024, residents of the Toronto Gore area received a notice informing them that the Toronto Gore Estate Area Infill Study Policy Framework was to be presented at a statutory public meeting today. However, at the March 27th, 2024 meeting, Council passed a motion to remove this item, and as such, it will not be presented today. Notices were mailed out to area residents to inform them of this cancellation. So if anybody happens to be here because they didn't receive the notice that the Toronto Gore Estate Area Infill Study Policy was removed from the agenda today, I'm sorry, it was removed from the agenda today. So if anybody else is, maybe if I can get staff just to have a quick conversation with the individuals that are now leaving, just to let them know when we'll have it back on. So we did send out, we sent out notifications to all residents letting you know that it was canceled. I apologize if you did not receive those notifications. And staff will be happy to talk to you about when we can get those notices back out to you and when it'll be back on the agenda at a future date. I apologize. The next is declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Is there any members that have like to declare a conflict of interest? Seeing none, our consent agenda. The items that I'll go through are up for consent. I'll go straight to 7.2, I believe. 7.2, staff report, proposed modifications to the Brampton Plan Major Transit Station area. No, we have a presentation on as of 7.1. 7.3, application to amend the zoning bylaw, PMB Holdings Limited, Weston Consulting, 10810 Coleraine Drive, Ward 10. Consent. 7.4, staff report, application to the draft plan of subdivision amend the zoning bylaw, 7 Developments, Inc., Blackthorn Development Corp., 10378 Torbram Road, Ward 9. Consent. 7.5, staff report, 2023 Development Activity Report. Consent. 7.6, staff report, application to amend the zoning bylaw, plan of subdivision, Hampton Development Corp., SGL Planning and Design, 241 Queen Street East, Ward 3. Consent. 7.7, staff report, application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Glenn Schnarr and Associates, 13514-161 Canada Inc., 8654 Mississauga Road, Ward 6. Consent. 7.8, staff report, building improvement grant application, 27 and 27A Queen Street East, Ward 3. Consent. 8.1, Brampton Heritage Board minutes. Consent. 11.1, correspondence application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Corsiac Planning, Ash Singh, 123125 Railroad Street, Ward 1. Those correspondence are in consent. 11.2, correspondence application to draft plan of subdivision and amend the zoning bylaw, 7 Developments, Blackthorn Development Corp. 10378 Torbram Road, Ward 9. Consent. 11.3, correspondence application to amend we'll leave those correspondence as there are delegations. Correspondence proposed modifications to the Brampton Plan Major Transit Station Area Policies. 11.4, consent. Now I will go back to the public meetings. Our first public meeting has a fair number of delegations, so I'll go and look for item 5.2. As 5.2 has no delegations, correct? Is there anybody in the audience today that would like to hear a presentation on application to amend the zoning bylaw draft plan of subdivision CanDevCon Limited on behalf of Mesera Asunta and Franca Villa Teresa, 0 Clarkway Drive, Ward 10. I'll ask again if anybody is in the audience today to hear a staff presentation on the application to amend the zoning bylaw draft plan of subdivision CanDevCon Limited on behalf of Mesera Asunta and Francivilla Teresa, 0 Clarkway Drive, Ward 10. That item is adjourned. Bear with me, I've mixed up my papers. Moved by Councillor Power and seconded by Councillor Tour, the consent agenda. Thank you. 5.3, there's no delegations, correct? Would anybody here in attendance today like to hear a staff presentation on an application to amend the zoning bylaw and draft plan of subdivision Siva Rama Krishna Prasad Ari, 11038 The Gore Road, Ward 10? I'll ask again. Is anybody here that'd like to have a staff presentation on the application to amend the zoning bylaw draft plan of subdivision for Siva Rama Krishna Prasad Ari, 11038 The Gore Road, Ward 10? Seeing none, that item is adjourned. And the rest have delegations. Do you need movers for those ones? No. We'll go to our first statutory public meeting. Staff presentation, application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Blackthorn Development Corporation, Mitra T. Kissoon, Denisha Kwar Kissoon, and Sugrim Enterprises, Inc. 5557, 5961, 63, and 65 Park Street, Ward 1. Samantha Del Pena, we have you. Come on up, Samantha. Thank you, welcome.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, members of the public, and city colleagues. My name is Sam Del Pena, and I am the planner assigned to process and review the subject application. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to the public and seek feedback on the application filed by Blackthorn Development Corp. On behalf of Mitra T. Kissoon, Danish War Kissoon, and Sugrim Enterprises, Inc. Next slide, please. The subject property is located in Ward 1 with municipal addresses 55, 57, 59, 61, 63, and 65 Park Street. The site is located west of Park Street and south of Railroad Street. Next slide, please.
Samantha, can I get you to speak up a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sure.
For volume, if we can get the volume turned up as well, please.
Thank you. This map shows an overview of the subject site within the property and surrounding land uses. To the north, single detached residential dwellings, beyond which is Railroad Street, CN Rail, and industrial uses. To the south, single detached residential dwellings, beyond which is Denison Avenue. To the east, Park Street, beyond which is Orangeville, Brampton Railway, and a parking lot. And to the west, West Street, beyond which are single detached residential dwellings. Next slide, please. This slide shows an aerial photo of the site. The site has access to Park Street and Railroad Street. Next slide, please. The following slide shows the site visit conducted looking south from Railroad Street and looking north from Denison Avenue. Next slide, please. The applicant has submitted an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw in order to facilitate a residential intensification development consisting of one 30-story apartment building with a total gross floor area of 24,179.28 square meters, a floor space index of 12.0, outdoor amenity areas consisting of 519.25 square meters, 240 residential units, and 114 underground parking spaces, a loading area, and private lane access from Park Street. Next slide, please. A tertiary plan is a land use study to guide new or redevelopment proposals within a specified area. The city can require them from applicants to demonstrate how the development of their site can be coordinated with other properties. A tertiary plan was submitted with this application and, if approved, would be attached as an appendix to the secondary plan. Next slide, please. Prior to finalizing recommendations and advancing associated final report to council, this development application will be further evaluated for compliance with the Planning Act as amended, consistency with the provincial policy statement, and conformity to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe as amended, and conformity to the In Effect Region of Peel official plan, City of Brampton official plan, and its Downtown Brampton secondary plan. Next slide, please. The subject site for the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment is designated Central Area in the City of Brampton's official plan, which permits freestanding or mixed-use development that includes a range of office, retail, and service activities, residential uses, entertainment and cultural uses, institutional uses, high-density employment, and major transit infrastructure. The proposed development does require an amendment to the official plan. Next slide, please. On November 1st, 2023, Brampton Council adopted the City of Brampton's new official plan, Brampton Plan. The official plan provides clear direction and principles to guide city building, attaining its vision for the future, and support the city to become a vibrant urban city of over 1 million people by 2051. The Council adopted official plan is currently with the region for review and approval, as the region remains the approval authority for the local official plan amendments. The subject site for the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment is designated mixed use within Schedule 2 designations of the Brampton Plan and community area within a primary transit station area, as well as an urban center within Schedule 1A city structure of the Brampton Plan. Next slide, please. The lands are within the Downtown Brampton secondary plan are designated as medium density residential. The proposed development does not fall within these uses, and an amendment to the secondary plan is therefore required to permit the proposed development. Please note that as per the major transit station area policies in the council-approved Brampton Plan, until such time that secondary plan and/or precinct plan policies are implemented for each primary major transit station area, the major transit station area policies in Chapter 2 and 4 of this plan take precedent over any existing land use and minimum density secondary plan policies. Next slide, please. The lands are zoned Residential Extended 1 or R2B1 zone. Land use permissions include low to medium density residential uses and other accessory uses. An amendment to the zoning bylaw is therefore required to facilitate the proposed development, and as such, next slide, please. The applicant proposes to amend the zoning bylaw from the current Residential Extended 1 R2B1 zone to Residential Apartment B with a special section. Highlights of the proposed zone include a maximum building height of 30 stories, a maximum lot coverage of 50%, a minimum landscape open space of 18%, a maximum floor space index of 9.4, a minimum rear yard depth of 7.5 meters, a minimum front yard depth of 3.0 meters, and a minimum interior side yard width of 7.4 meters. Next slide, please. At this time, preliminary issues and considerations that will need to be addressed include land use compatibility, and the emerging MTSA framework. The subject property is located within the boundaries of the Brampton GO primary major transit station area where intensification is planned to occur. As such, staff are looking to ensure that new buildings are compatible with the existing neighborhood context while also considering future intensification. Building height, separation, and setbacks. Staff are also looking to ensure appropriate height, tower, separation, and building setbacks are implemented through the zoning bylaw amendment process. And tertiary plan. Staff are looking to ensure that the redevelopment potential of neighboring parcels within the block are not impacted by the proposed development. And heritage. Given that the subject lands are in proximity to existing heritage properties, staff are looking to ensure that the design of the buildings are sympathetic to surrounding heritage. Next slide, please. Staff is hosting a statutory public meeting this evening to share information of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment on the subject site and provide an opportunity for members of the public to express comments, perspectives, and opinions. Staff will continue to review the applicant's planning rationale and supporting plans, drawings, and technical comments, and staff will advance a final recommendation report for council decision in the future based on the details of the proposed development and applicable planning laws and policies, while incorporating comments and considerations from community members, technical reviewers, and other stakeholders. Staff will also follow up with members of the public and other stakeholders who have spoken, written in, or advised of an interest in monitoring the proposal. Next slide, please. For more information on the development proposal, the applicant's submission materials, including architectural plans, drawings, and supporting studies, these are all publicly accessible through the city's Brand Plan online portal. Just type the file number of the application in the required field, which in this case is OZS-2024-0001. This will bring you to the file page where by clicking the File Info tab, you will be allowed to view all the drawings and documents associated with this development application. Next slide, please. This public meeting presentation will be available online as part of the Planning and Development Committee meeting minutes shortly. The final recommendation report will be posted on the city's PDC meeting agenda in advance of a future meeting. For any questions or comments about this development application, please contact myself, my manager, or the applicant, Maurizio Regato, who is representing Blackthorn Development Corp. The corresponding contact info is shown on the screen. Next slide, please. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Samantha. So before I go to the delegations, I just want everybody to know that this application is not a city application. This is somebody owns a piece of property, and it's everybody's right that if you own a piece of property, you want to change that zoning, you want to change that use, you can come here to try and do so. So it's not staff's application, it's not council's application, it's a landowner's application. Okay? So with that being said, I'll go to the delegations. Barbara Johnstone. Barbara in the audience, or hi Barbara, come on up, you have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. I have a bad cold, so please forgive me. Good evening, members of Planning and Development Committee, all staff, applicant. My name is Barbara Johnstone, and I live at 84 Nelson Street West. It's been my humble home since 1997. I address you tonight as a point person for the newly formed Nelson West Resident Association. In a few short months, we have received enthusiastic support with a membership that is growing daily. We are so proud of our community, of its unique character homes, and the diverse and friendly people who live in them. We're facing many challenges as a community, and we do appreciate the need for housing. However, we ask only that the housing proposed on this specific site conforms with the official plan and the current zoning bylaw of low to medium density. Anything other than this adversely impacts the existing homes. We are an established community, and we expect, and we deserve no less. Many of my neighbors will also be speaking tonight, and thank you for giving them an opportunity to express their feelings with you about this project. I encourage you to listen very carefully and with great empathy. Put yourself in their shoes and imagine your home being towered over by a 30-story monolith with garbage disposal and services practically in your backyard. Many of my neighbors on West and Denison Streets have lived in their modest homes for decades, some choosing to age in place, such as myself and my husband. Some have recently purchased because of the welcoming character of our community and the individuality of the historic homes. This infill project has the potential to set the stage for an award-winning urban design concept like no other in all of Brampton. This is happening all over Canada, a plan that maximizes limited space while conforming with existing zoning bylaws and the OP. We have a fourplex actually currently being constructed on West Street between Queen and Nelson. This excessive development, bordering on 3 sides very closely by older, smaller homes, will forever change the character, comfort, and the quintessential simplicity of this established neighborhood. Do not mistake, we as a community don't object to development, and we do understand the need for housing. We would welcome an urban renewal project in this location that is in harmony with the surrounding homes, that offers affordable mixed-use housing in a form that complements, not competes with, and enhances the established character that we, as longtime residents, hold so dear. I recently visited family members in Maple Ridge in New Westminster, BC. That's where I caught this cold. Where stacked, back-to-back townhomes are mixed in with single and semi-detached historic homes. Fourplexes have recently been identified as a desired form of much-needed housing in major cities all across Canada, including Toronto, Mississauga, and Vancouver. Homes that make ownership possible for many, that are in harmony with the existing neighborhoods, zoning bylaws, and the official plans. Planners are working with developers and existing neighborhoods and are focused on providing unique and harmonious built form. There is not a point tower to be seen in Westminster, BC, even right beside the SkyTrain. What a concept. So, the last thing that I want to say is you, as planning staff and the planning committee, you can do better than to rubber stamp this application as is. So can you do better. We welcome the opportunity, and we understand that a meeting is going to be set up with the property owner, his consultants, city staff, and our councillor as soon as possible to discuss how we can do better with this much-needed urban renewal project. The clock begins tonight, and we must get it right together. We have one chance.
Great job, Barbara. Thank you. Our next delegation is Kevin Troke. Kevin. Welcome, Kevin. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to listen to our little piece of Brampton, or as I called it in the past, the jewel of the GTA. I know that Brampton deemed the other side of Park Street and down high density, and they drew the line, and it was Park Street. If we allow this change, everything is now open. It is hard to have a community, to plant your roots and grow a family as I am, when the city can change their mind for developers. If this does go through, why would any of us in the area invest in our house or community? Why build a garage, get solar panels, plan cleanups and street barbecues, if in 4 to 5 years another developer will buy my land, or worse, build a 30-story tower right beside my house, as is planned for people here tonight? I feel like this city has started a residential association because they know the importance of bringing people together, to build bonds and create a strong community. We are doing what you asked for, and now we ask you to listen. Now I'm going to use the word hope a few times here. Brampton, as I understand it, is about community, people coming together, people helping people. My mantra, and I think what life is all about. I hope this community deciding today sees that in this room. I hope they see the very thing every city hopes for, envies even. It is people coming together with so much hope and pride for their neighborhood and their city that they want it to remain. To love the streets so much that they want the next generation to have the same experience. Kids knocking on doors, playing in the streets, people connecting with each other. Confident the city won't suddenly make changes to zoning and allow a 30-story tower.
No more. No more.
Sorry.
No
Sorry.
more.
No.
Not when somebody, sorry, Kevin, stop the time for a second. I won't allow that when somebody's speaking, okay? You want to do it afterwards, that's fine, but not during somebody's delegation. If anybody and you do it again, you're gone. Do you understand? Sure. Thank you. Sorry about that, Kevin.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
That was my time.
Thank you
very
for your
much.
delegation, Kevin. Our next, thank you, Kevin. Our next delegation is Jonah Senk. Jonah? Jonah? No. I was going to say, you're not Jonah. Is Jonah Sink here online? No? Okay. We'll put a hold on that if Jonah decides to show up. Stefan Hornung. Hornung. Stefan.
Stephanie Beaumier.
Nope. Not yet, Stephanie. Welcome, Stefan. You have 5 minutes.
I reside at 25 West Street with my wife Olive. My name is Stefan Hornung. I will speak on behalf of my wife and myself. I thank you, the Council and Planning Board members, for this great opportunity for me to address you personally. As I was putting words onto this paper, one very short speech came to mind. Words I will never forget, namely, critiques I do not need, but help I need, help I want. Maybe this is why we are all here. We are not to criticize, we may be of some help. I do have to admit, we do not speak to our elected council often, nor do we convey our wishes as we should. But today is a day we must be heard. Through you, the planning board. We hope you will see our concern for this unwanted project on Park Street, namely the 30-story high-rise and townhouse units. Possibly, our council may have alerted by you, the planning board, the proposal to build a multi-story building in the backyards of West Street citizens will be overpowering. The 30-story tower with 234 housing units and only 114 parking spaces below and 6 3-story townhouse buildings along are out of place. Most are aware this will add nearly 1,000 people to the other side of people's backyards. A small housing scheme with a park could mitigate the 45 Railroad Street high-rise fiasco, where proper setbacks and sidewalks were overlooked and a choke point to Mill Street was created, just in front of the railroad crossing at the confluence of 3 streets. What a shame. Where will the new tenants shop? The nearest stores are a liquor store, a cannabis parlor, and a soup kitchen of sort. Same, where will they park? Without enough spaces in the building. Will it be on Park's Railroad Street or maybe on West Street? How will traffic develop? Railroad tracks on one side with only one crossing and a small side street on that other half of the development. Presently, the same streets seem to be overloaded with habitual latecomers to catch the train. How will the fire trucks, ambulances quickly make their way in emergency situations? With more and more speed bumps installed to slow down traffic and the never-ending detours into nowhere. How about it? It's not fair to assume that our learned planners are ignorant of the fact that this scheme is in the wrong place. A scheme supported by outsiders, not living here, nor have any commitments to our community, nor will they see or feel the many trucks lumber down our streets day in and day out, for years to come till the completion of this project. Finally, we will be stuck, perhaps for the next 100 years, with a building nobody really wanted, although needed somewhere else. When things go sour, people on West Street and people nearby, renters in their tower abode, will think back on our planners of the day, and more so on our council members at the city to let this all happen. Perhaps one day of our city fathers or mothers will lend their name to this project, if it goes through. I thank you all for listening to my gripes. My apologies to people I have offended. God bless.
Thank you for your delegation. Our next delegation is Suzanne White. Suzanne, are you here?
Yep.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi.
Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Council and Planning and Staffing. My name is Suzanne White. I've lived on West Street for almost 28 years. I'd like to start off, first of all, saying that the development of 45 Railroad, how it impacted us already the last couple of years. And with between the construction, the noise, the dust, the mice, I mean, the traffic, it was going on and on and on. Now that it's, actually open, you can see it right there. It's impacting in our backyards already. We could hear the construction crew talking to each other, the elevators going up and down. We were woken up at 6 o'clock in the a.m. every morning, and even on Saturdays. So we already know the impact already. So then I'd like to talk about, now that it's open, how, the amount of people that are walking back and forth with their dogs, they're not picking up their garbage and everything else. So I'd like to go to the next slide. Okay, this is a backyard on Denison. You can see the rooftops on top. All those trees, those are on that property. There's not many trees left in that area because of the storm that we had several years ago. So you can see how the impact of having a 30-story building into that person's backyard. Next slide, please. This is another person. You can see the green roof, all the roofs and those trees. That is the impact onto that house on Denison. Next slide, please. This is another one. This is 6 Denison. This is the backyard. You can see more of the top of the roofs of the housing, how it's going to impact us. Basically, they're going to be looking into our backyard. They might as well come for a picnic. Next slide, please. This is another property. This is 8 Denison, their backyard. Next slide, please. This is a rental. We'll not even go down that road right now, but this is on, this is 12 and 14 Denison. Next slide, please. This is my backyard. I enjoy my backyard. I have people coming over and everything else. We grow gardens and all that stuff. So you can see the rooftops again, how it's going to be basically, they're going to be living in my backyard. Next slide, please. This is my neighbor, 84, Maxine, has a beautiful backyard. You can see again, all those trees will be gone. There'll be nothing left. Next slide, please. This is 86 West Street. I never realized how much they had no trees. He'll definitely be seeing that building. None of us will ever see sun again. We won't be able to grow gardens. We won't be able to have parties because people will be staring into our backyards. Next slide, please. This is another one, 88. You can see the impact of 45 Railroad, how you can see the houses there again. Next slide. This is another house again, the backyards, you can see them totally all the top of the roofs. So it's going to be impacting our privacy. Again, no sun, nothing else. Next slide, please. And this is another one here. So if you want to go to the next slide, it's a little bit better. There's that backyard. That's Stephanie Beaumier's backyard.
Could you imagine when you have a high-rise that up like that and you're trying to sit in the backyard with your friends and family? So, you know, basically at the end of the day, I would like you guys to put yourself in our shoes because this is a big concern. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Next up, we have Diane and Ron McCoy. Diane and Ron McCoy. Welcome, Diane.
Hi, thank you. I'll be speaking on behalf of my
Okay,
husband.
you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. We are the owners of 2 Denison Avenue, located at the corner of Park Street and Denison Avenue. We've been there now for close to 28 years. I would like to focus on the key issues and considerations that has been presented by the city. Approximately 5 years ago, we had front row center seats to the construction of 45 Railroad. At that time, it was proposed and promoted to keep up the heritage of the building that was once Dominion Skate, the Copeland Chatterson printing house back in the early 1900s. Unfortunately, as we look at the new buildings today, we struggle to see exactly where that heritage was upheld. During the construction of 45 Railroad, we persevered and endured concrete dust, noise, pollution, garbage, no privacy in our own backyard, and absolutely zero regard for ours and the neighboring properties. All this while trying to navigate through a global pandemic. Now we have a combination of 52 stories with approximately 360 units having front row center seats into our backyard. The privacy we once knew is gone forever. Years of seasons coming and going, not being able to open our windows for fresh air because of concrete dust. Not being able to sit in our own backyard due to the concrete dust, the noise, the pollution, and just outright noise pollution. Seeing garbage hanging off the branches of mature trees and all over everyone's properties. With the exception to the extra volume of vehicles and added population to the area, nothing much has changed since 45 Railroad recently opened its doors to occupancy. Since opening to residents, we have witnessed irresponsible dog owners not picking up waste, firecrackers being shot from balconies, numerous visits from the fire department, garbage overflowing from the bins that sit outside for more than 24 hours, garbage not making it into the disposal bin upon pickup. It's a loud process that occurs 2 to 3 times per week. Garbage, noise, pollution, no privacy, no regard, no change. We were and still are unreasonably impacted by this new residential development. 45 Railroad is barely down the road from our house, and now a proposal to build a 30-story, 240-unit complex right in our backyards. Literally, right in our backyards. Being long-term residents, we only recently found ourselves in a position to complain to the city about negative impacts to our property. Words cannot even express how this proposal is beyond having a negative impact to this area. At this stage, upon reviewing the city's plan, there are more questions than there are answers. This is our lives we are talking about. Our perseverance and endurance shouldn't be compromised. We need to be able to continually prosper and to try and comfortably live in a place that we call home. We trust that our input on this proposal is heard, respected, and valued by all parties involved. A 30-story tower in this location is not the solution. This proposal needs serious reconsideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation, Diane. Our next delegation is Gertrude Barbita. That one's withdrawn. My apologies. Stephanie Beaumier. Stephanie? Welcome, Stephanie. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I would like to start off by acknowledging that the land on which we are meeting today and our neighborhood, the land that we are fostering, is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississauga of the Credit. My name is Stephanie Beaumier, and I first moved to Brampton in 1975. In that time, I have been welcoming of the changes in the city, and as some of you know, I have consistently tried to be an effecting member of this community. Like many of my neighbors, I moved to West Street in 1995. I watched their children grow up. Many more in the area have lived here for much longer, 40, 50, 60 plus years. This is not a transient community. It is what I proudly describe as a front porch community that looks out for each other. Don't paint me or my neighbors as NIMBYs. We welcome development where it makes sense. This makes no sense. There are plenty of properties nearby ripe for development that are more logical options for this type of build. I'm afraid I'm not going to be as eloquent as my fellow neighbors in their speeches, but I will be brief. I simply have a few questions to pose to the committee, and they are in no particular order. First, let me dare state that there is not a housing shortage in Brampton. There is an affordable housing shortage in Brampton. Will you show us how this proposal will help alleviate this chronic situation? Last year, I saw a bald eagle soaring out over my house. This morning, I watched a couple of woodpeckers pecking around on the back tree. We have hawks, blue jays, monarch butterflies, bees, cardinals, robins, hummingbirds. They'll be gone. Their trees will be gone. The root systems will be destroyed. Will this committee confirm that an environmental assessment has been or will be completed? The Nelson West neighborhood is a diverse, livable, safe, thriving, attractive component of historic downtown. A collection of unique individuals living in harmony, taking pride in our properties and our community. The fabric of our community is strong and deserves to be protected. Will the committee show that this proposal fits within the fabric of our community? Has a neighborhood assessment been performed, or will a neighborhood assessment be performed? And finally, if this is allowed to proceed, will you please detail how the approval of this amendment will affect the city's official plan and outline all future implications of setting a precedent in our neighborhood? Are you really going to allow it to be sold off in pieces and let developers do with it whatever their money can buy? Because it's starting to look that way. On a personal note, should this development be approved, my backyard will be directly adjacent to 30 stories of people able to look directly in on me, and a creepy back alley teeming with garbage rats and potentially creating a perfect spot for illegal dealings and crime to occur. It will 100% take away my right to feel safe in my own backyard. I love my neighborhood, but I will be forced to relocate to somewhere more suited to my needs. Therefore, the final question I have to ask is to myself. Do I rent out my house to foreign students, sell to the slumlord with the highest offer, or apply to build a sixplex? Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing your responses.
Thank you, Stephanie, for your delegation. Next delegation is Andrew Porter. Andrew? Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, councillors, and planning committee. I have a prepared statement. It's a bit longer. I'll try and finish it up or shorten it. The proposed Park Street development and the tertiary plan it leads, as I understand, I believe is a death knell for our neighborhood. While some challenges, it is a community that works. Many of our neighbors here today may express their concerns about the potential noise, disruption, traffic chaos, garbage disposal, shadow casting, and cutting down 20 trees home to birds that welcome the day with their song. They may also speak about how there is no transition from single-family homes to a towering slab with the resulting loss of enjoyment and privacy within their own backyards. I don't want to further repeat those statements, although they impact me as well. Instead, I would like to discuss the community my fiancé and I have come to love in the short 14 months that we've lived here, and what will be lost if this development is approved. In truth, we originally did not consider Brampton to be a desirable place to live. Biasly thinking, it consisted only of ugly cookie-cutter houses and high-rise deserts. However, by chance and by our surprise, we happened upon an open house in 2022 and experienced an unusual unanimity in deciding this was where we wanted to spend the remainder of our lives, to become part of a community and hopefully to contribute to make it better. In all my years, I've never experienced a community as close and friendly as this one. Some residents are new like ourselves, and others have been here for decades. On my daily walks to the dog park, I've personally made more friendly acquaintances in 1 year than I have done in any other community I've lived. There are owners who have lived here for decades and can tell you stories of the local history of who lived there. For example, in our house, a 120-year-old semi-detached, when I say where I live, multiple people have said, "Oh, Herman's house." Herman hasn't lived there since 2013, and people still remember him. Apparently, he was quite a character. Anyway, one lady, renter who grew up next door, literally in my neighbor's house, told me how the building was built for a woman and her disabled daughter so they could each have private home and still be available to care for each other if needed, which I feel actually represents this community. The tertiary plan will tear down this building that has been home to dozens of families over the years and turn it into a 16-story mixed-use mid-rise. This is a community that is a pleasure to walk through, offering a variety of homes and buildings to see, with maple trees that bloom and color in the fall. While some homes may show a need for repair, others exhibit the pride of ownership with the unique personalized features such as miniature elf-sized furniture, library boxes, glowing hearts, and seasonal artwork made by their children. These features are adjacent to my block, which will be turned into a 40-story tower according to the plan. In our short time here, we have been amazed by the friendly and welcoming attitude of our neighbors, the gentle union of people from different cultures, economic backgrounds, and employment. People walk their dogs, take their children to the park, play cricket in the baseball diamonds, and pick up garbage on Earth Day. There are both long and short-term renters who seem to feel comfortable and welcome, relatively safe within the neighborhood, including our neighbors with 2 young children who were watching the eclipse today with excitement, and yes, they did have glasses. These are the types of observations that people have met in just 1 year. We are not fool enough to expect no new development or intensification, which would be neither desirable nor realistic progress for this community. However, we have a vain hope that any new development in the area would be strategic and surgical in nature to enhance and build on a strong and vibrant neighborhood that welcomes new residents to become part of the soul and heritage of this community offers. Running out of time. Having lived briefly in Mississauga, high-rise, I can attest I had no connection to the community despite being close to transit, shopping, and the park. Found walking through the neighborhood to be an unpleasant and boring experience. So my impression is the tertiary plan is hoping to replicate that soul-diminishing lifestyle for thousands of new residents. I respectfully urge you, the committee, to reject this proposal and think innovatively on how to build a community that people want to live in. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew, for your delegation. Our next delegation is Matthew Samaras. Matthew? Welcome, Matthew. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity for me to speak regarding the applications to amend the zoning bylaws for 55, 57, 59, 61, 63, and 65 Park Street. My wife and I originally moved from our childhood homes in Bramalea into downtown Brampton to start a family and live in a more residential area with other family homes that had a community feel. We were fortunate enough to find that on West Street. West Street has provided a community atmosphere for my family and I for over 17 years. The low-density area has been a great way to raise our family, but if the city allows this rezoning, the entire section will lose out on that sense of community. We understand Brampton needs more housing, and this is not an instance of not in our neighborhood. This is an instance of not the right fit in this section of Park Street and the surrounding area for the streets and the houses. Getting right to the point is not to waste time waxing poetically on how Brampton has changed and we're no longer it's no longer the Brampton we grew up in. We understand that. We understand and embrace the growth of our city, but it needs to be done correctly and not at the expense of single-family homes. I bring up the following. First, safety issues, and I speak on behalf of my own house and my own house only. With the building, we have moving cranes directly overhead of my house. There is no way that this building, if passed, could be built without having the cranes working directly over my house, my backyard, where my children, my wife, and my dogs sit down and enjoy time together. Debris on a windy day, interesting, but we saw it and we had to clean it up constantly after the towers were built on 45 Railroad. Now this building is just steps away from my own backyard. The placement of the entrance to the underground parking is right along our fence line. It's less than 30 feet. According to plans, it'll be right up against the property line. With the builder's proposal of 114 underground parking spots, that's emissions of 114 cars entering and exiting several times a day, only feet away from our backyard. What about my family, my children's health, and my family's safety that these pollutants will cause on a daily basis? With having to build the underground parking, the builder itself will have to underpin in such a way that it'll cross over into our property line. How will this affect my backyard's integrity? How will it change the floodplain in the direction of water flow after a rainfall or snow melt? Garbage dumps. Again, against the property line. We are in the area and have already seen a large increase of rats since the past 2 buildings were put in. And the garbage dumpsters on a hot August day when my family and I are enjoying an afternoon. On the other side of the parking garage, they propose the place of the exhaust fans and what pollutants would be exiting there and of what is the level of constant noise. Speaking of noise, from these items, which are all mere feet away from my backyard, trying to enjoy a nice family barbecue will be enjoyable with the wafting stench of garbage or the dog run, the constant whirling of exhaust fans, and the constant noise from the garage door opening and closing. If that does not deter us from spending time outside, then the windows and balconies being on our side, less when family's over. Sure, kids, at the end of it, let's get some rest. Which again, feet from our house, all the constant noise, all hours of the night, all hours of the day and night of the garage door opening and the 5 a.m. garbage collection 3 times a week. On another note, street parking. Pre-COVID, West Street had many people parking on our streets due to the overflow of GO parking, and in many cases, an easier way to leave the area after arriving from the GO train. With many commuters requesting workers, with many companies requesting workers back in their office, we've seen an influx of cars parking, especially since the building of 45 removed some of the additional overflow of GO Transit parking. Which brings me to my next point. During the winter break, the city was forced to bring in paid duty police officers to direct traffic as it became too busy of an intersection, especially when the GO train came in. What's the city going to do to ease the traffic flow? The infrastructure cannot build new roads, and the roads we have now are being brought down to 1 lane for additional bike lanes, which are causing slower traffic. I've seen council reject proposals like this for the exact same reasons we've brought up this evening. Balconies too close to residential homes, buildings too high and close to houses causing blockages of sunlight. Buildings too close to the roads. These were all denied because residents like us have concerns over. I plead with council to reject this proposal on common sense alone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your delegation. Our next delegation is Adam Croach. Adam? Welcome, Adam. You have 5 minutes.
Just curious, can I control that anyway
Nope.
from here? No?
We can,
Okay.
no. You just tell us to move it and we'll move it.
Are you able to start on slide 15 then? Because if not, we'll be here
100%.
for days. Yeah.
Yep.
Hello and welcome for your time. My name is Adam Crouch. I live at 7 Denison Avenue, just a few steps from the proposed development. I actually originally moved to West Street in 2015, and I liked the neighborhood so much that I literally moved around the corner to Denison Avenue. My main concern is more that the planning comments were completely ignored. Next slide. It's contrary to the official plan. They're asking for a major amendment. Only medium density is allowed. They're asking for maximum high density, maximum 50 units per hectare. They're asking for 240 units in one building. against the bylaws, so they need a major amendment. Max 13 meters high, they're asking for 90 meters high. Zoned RB21, which means only semis, towns, and no apartment buildings. They want a giant high-rise. The planning comments actually said include appropriate transition to the context in terms of height, massing, built form to ensure light view and privacy are maintained in the neighboring things, which they ignored. Harmoniously integrate with the surrounding area. Clearly they ignored that. Consider the surrounding low-density residential neighborhood and future Orangeville-Brampton Trail when designing the ground floor. Again, they completely ignored it. Follow the angular plane, which again is to bring light down to the street. They completely ignored that as well. Next slide. They also ignored the Brampton Urban Design Guidelines. Next slide. Which says create smooth transitions from adjacent, existing, or potential lower, higher build forms. Ignored. Avoid drastic changes in height. Ignored. Provide variation in heights within the building. Step down to where lower properties are. They ignored it. Articulating the roof line to include slope towards lower buildings. They didn't do that. Ensuring that massing of a flat roof building is generally consistent with the overall massing of adjacent dwellings. Not even close. Where low-rise apartment buildings are located beside 1 and 2 story existing buildings, and this is low-rise, not even high-rise. Ensure that the height of the portion of the building closest is no more than 2 stories higher than existing buildings. They want 30 stories. The new development on lots adjacent to built heritage resources, which the West Street neighborhood is, will provide a transition in lot sizes, setback, massing, and grading that complements the built heritage resource. Again, they completely ignored this. And finally, it says to provide the missing middle housing types, which is detached, semi-detached, and towns, which again, this is cheap. Sorry.
You know, every time you hit your hand, we're getting people.
I'm sorry.
They're listening online and they're hearing the bells.
Sorry, online. Yeah. All right.
We know your passion.
Yeah, I'll just keep them behind me. That's probably easier. And next slide, please. So you can see the proposed development is well outside the urban growth center that was designated by that nice red line. Next slide, please. I don't know if anyone here has spent extensive time on construction sites. I have. I work in development. Next slide, please. But they're loud, dirty, and dangerous places. Next slide, please. They propose 3 levels underground parking, which means digging a massive 200 feet by 130 feet wide by 40-foot deep pit, essentially in all these people's backyards. Shoring and laying will need to be installed, which means tiebacks directly into people's houses and backyards. Next slide, please. Months of huge dump trucks and heavy machinery taking out loads of soil one after the other, constantly going. Next slide, please. They will need to erect a giant crane that will be swinging over people's backyards and houses. Next slide. When the concrete does finally start, there will be a steady stream of concrete trucks waiting and blocking nearby streets. They have about 45 minutes before their concrete's no good, so they will be lining up Denison, Park Street, every single street there. It's a mess. Next slide. You can just keep going. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. There's the trucks. Next slide. Okay, so increased vehicle traffic. Next slide. According to their traffic impact study, they're proposing 72 more cars on the road in the mornings and 86 new cars in the evening. Right now, as people have alluded to, the area is already congested with 45 Railroad going up, and their only reasoning for building this is because they're so close to the GO train. I don't know if anybody has taken the GO train at rush hour, but it is well over capacity already, and there's no way that any of these people are going to be taking that GO train. The next point. One more. They are also destroying all the trees in this area. Their tree evaluation report shows that there's 13 mature trees on the property, 10 of which are in good health and need to be saved. But in order to replace those trees with new trees, they would need to plant 43 trees on that site, literally a forest the size of the whole lot. So the developer is just deciding to pay $650 per tree and get rid of all the trees. Next slide. This is a perfect diagram that they've included there. All the red ones will be ripped out, and you can see they're fronting everyone's backyard, and those yellow ones at the top are actually not in the site, but on adjacent properties. Those will all be damaged and likely killed by this development because of how close the development is to those people's backyards. So not only are the red trees gone, but also the yellow ones will be destroyed as well. The one exception being that green one on the left there, and which they are very happy to say that they are saving. So at least they're getting one. Next slide. Next slide. So really, there is very weak justification I found for this project. They say 45 railroads set a precedent. Really, it's a completely different site. It's flanked by 2 streets and directly adjacent to the GO station. It preserves the heritage building at the ground floor. It's owner built and operated, which means it's a rental with fairly strong vetting process. They use higher end finishes so the building remains over time, and a mix of extra large units meant to accommodate different families and residents. The Park Street proposal, on the other hand, is directly in the middle of low-density residential neighborhood, demolishing all trees and buildings on site, designed to be investor units for a quick return on investment with no vetting of renters. Cheap material designed only to last 2 years during the warranty period, and then it'll be dumped on the condo board to maintain. Mostly just small, cheaply constructed one-bedroom units, only for investors. That's what this is for.
I'll ask you to wrap up that.
Oh, sorry.
Please.
There's all the banging. Next slide.
No, that's
I'm almost done. I got
I'll give you a little more time.
Also, they're going on to the PPS, which, in my opinion, really is a weak argument as well. There is a lot of language in there about supporting heritage neighborhoods. Next slide. Finally, this is just a diagram to show the developer profits in terms of construction costs. Either way, whether they put a 4-story building or a 30-story building, they can still get profit out of that. The only reason they'd want a 30-story building is because they get, instead of millions of dollars, they get tens of or even 50 millions of dollars. So you can see it there. Next slide. Finally, all I'm going to say is why not townhouses? It would allow for increased density to meet the targets. It's buildable under the current bylaws and official plan. It's appropriate for the site. It can aesthetically blend into the heritage of the neighborhood. Still provide high profits for the developers, increase surrounding property values, drastically decrease construction time and disruption to the neighborhood, which would be nice, and allow for the preservation of more trees. And if you just go one more slide, I'm almost done, sorry. That's on Nelson Street, which would be a good example for the plan. And one more slide. And this was just a real quick sketch I did on Friday saying that you can put towns on this lot. There's no reason why they can't. So that's it. I'm done. Thank you. Sorry I went over. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our delegations, but I will give anybody an opportunity to come down and delegate on this item. I'd ask you to come down. We're going to have somebody come over to put your name. Sylvia, just state your name for the record and then go back in and sign afterwards, please.
Sure.
And then if we get some people to come down, they can write your name in the book. Go ahead, Sylvia.
All right. So my name is Sylvia Roberts. I'm a resident of Ward 3. I've been paying attention to the plans for this. In the secondary plan for this area, there are provisions for an extension of McMurtry to Pleasant View as a grade-separated crossing, which the current volume of vehicular traffic, Mill Street is already becoming quite dangerous, and I think we may need to close that anyway as part of putting in that third track. And so my question is, since we have this application, we've got 45 Railroad Street, we've got this application, we're having a bunch more applications. What is the status of that grade-separated crossings? Because the current roads cannot support the existing volume, let alone all the construction coming down the pipe. Is that in progress?
Keep going.
No, I mean, that was pretty much it. It's mostly focusing on, are we getting the transportation capacity in order to satisfy all these developments? Because with the new official plan, it's showing high density for this, from what I understand. It's where at the confluence of the Queen Street BRT, which is coming, we've got the Kitchener GO line, the provincial government has announced the LRT line, and so at Ontario Land Tribunal, sorry, it's hard to keep them straight. I don't see any way for the city, even if it really wanted to push for medium density, it's going to get approved by the OLT for high density. So we have to figure out, how do we build the infrastructure in place? And if we don't start that process relatively soon, because how long does it take to go through the EA? Because even if there's the second-tier plan, that's older things, we need the environmental assessment, and then there's the whole process to actually building and getting it to open it, which could take a decade, and this project might be done sooner than that. And Mill Street, as I've talked to a number of transportation people, Mill Street is already extremely dangerous with the current volume of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Welcome. Please state your name for the record. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Sushil Taylor. I've been a resident of Brampton for about 25 years. I moved a very long time ago in a new subdivision. It was new back in the day, near Worthington Avenue, around Mount Pleasant GO Station. And I'm here because I'm 35 and it is incredibly difficult to find a place, you know, to purchase, right? And to live in this city with my family. And so that's why I was kind of heckling, because everybody has a home here, great. But myself, 35, I make 6 figures. I'm doing okay on that end. I lived in Vancouver, right? But the rent now here is ridiculous, right? More than 40% of my own income will be ripped out of my pocket just so I can afford to live in the GTA. And everybody's working remotely now. And here I am having to, dare I say, you know, not even have a den or anything like that to work out of. So it becomes really painful for people my age and younger, like my siblings, to find a place to live near our families. And that's really why I've come out and just saying that I'm in support of additional density, additional housing options. And on top of it, I want to try to make the best use of the rest of my time, because I have some notes. There is a housing crisis. The price of rent is a very clear indication that there is a housing shortage. If you look at the price of rent, if the price of rent skyrockets, that is an indication that there is a shortage. If you look strictly at the price of houses for sale, that is subject to things like interest rates. So that doesn't necessarily tell you the full story whether or not there's a shortage. So if you look at the price of rent specifically, that is how you know there's a shortage, and the higher the price of rent is, the more of a shortage there is. I want people to know that, like, you know, try to rent a place in the city. Look at PadMapper. There absolutely is a shortage. There's only one winner when we oppose dense housing development, especially around major transit station areas. And those winners are slumlords with illegal basement apartments, much like the one in which we found over 20 students living in a cot in each basement, or much like the one last year in which the skin, and I'm really sorry about saying this, the skin of a toddler had melted due to an electrical fire. And when we, you know, this is the kind of city we live in. And by banning density in much of our city and opposing, you know, a 30-story monolith, yes, I know it kind of sucks, the demand doesn't disappear. People who are in poverty or who are trying to make a life in Canada get driven underground into these illegal apartments, which is dangerous and results in death. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your delegation. Next, please. Please state your name.
Hi, my name is Jillian Olahan, and I'm the owner of 76 McMurtry Avenue North. And I'm here proudly standing with my neighbors of West Street, Haggard Avenue, Railroad, and Park. I oppose the change of use / redevelopment on both Haggard and Park Street for the simple reason that these developments will impact the quality of life, security, and peace of mind for the residents in our neighborhood. I find it absolutely offensive that we have to defend our position as residents and homeowners against the pressure of developers who are not invested in our livelihoods and way of life. Our neighbors have been approached on many occasions by investors who would like nothing more than to short sell the homeowners and create densely populated housing without any consideration for the existing community we have worked so hard to build. These bullish tactics put our neighbors and neighborhood at risk for exploitation and isolation. We stand here to maintain connective tissue that creates community, but we can feel the developers climbing up our backs, and we need the city's help. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Okay, if you have not delegated tonight, you can come down and delegate now.
Excuse me, sorry. I didn't go through all my
pictures. I wonder if you could just do the last slides, if you don't mind. I didn't take up the whole 5 minutes. If you don't mind.
We can put them on, they're on the public agenda, and staff will definitely have a look at them, okay? Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll now move receipt of item 5.1, the staff presentation, application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Blackthorn Development Corporation, and all of the delegations listed on the public agenda. It's been moved by Councillor Santos. All in favor? That carries. Our next item is 5.4, but if we want, we'll give everybody a minute to quietly exit. Okay, with that, I am going to go to item 5.4, correct? Our staff presentation, application to amend the zoning official plan, zoning bylaw, Corsiac Planning, Ash Singh, 123, 125 Railroad Street, Ward 1. And we have Samantha back up. Welcome back, Samantha. Go ahead, Samantha. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, members of the public, and city colleagues. My name is Sam Del Pena, and I'm the planner assigned to process and review the subject application. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to the public and seek feedback on the application filed by Corsiac Planning on behalf of Ash Singh. Next slide, please. Okay, no worries. The subject property is located in Ward 1 with municipal addresses 123 and 125 Railroad Street. The site is located east of Haggard Avenue North and south of Railroad Street. I'll just keep going. Sorry, I need the map.
Okay, Samantha, just hold on for one
Keep going?
second.
Okay.
We don't want you to get too far ahead.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I'll come back to the photos.
Give us 1 second, Samantha.
Okay, no worries. Okay, there we go. That's perfect.
Is that where you want us?
Yes. Thank
Excellent.
you. This map shows an overview of the subject site within the property and surrounding land uses. To the north, 2 existing 6-story apartment buildings followed by Railroad Street and townhouse residential dwelling units. To the south, townhouse residential dwelling units. To the east, a surface parking lot followed by 5 6-story apartment buildings fronting McMurtry Avenue North. And to the west, Haggard Avenue North followed by townhouse residential dwelling units and Chris Gibson Park. Next slide, please. This slide shows an aerial photo of the site. The site has access to Haggard Avenue North and Railroad Street. Next slide, please. The following slide shows the site visit conducted looking north to the existing 6-story apartment buildings fronting Railroad Street. Next slide, please. The applicant has submitted an application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw in order to facilitate a development proposal consisting of a 39-story residential building with a 4 to 6-story podium that includes a total gross floor area of 35,580.64 square meters, a floor space index of 5.7, an outdoor amenity area of 1,252.52 square meters, 523 residential units, and 543 underground parking spaces. Next slide, please. A tertiary plan is a land use study to guide new or redevelopment proposals within a specified area. The city can require them from applicants to demonstrate how the development of their site can be coordinated with other properties. A tertiary plan was submitted with this application and, if approved, would be attached as an appendix to the secondary plan. Next slide, please. Prior to finalizing recommendations and advancing associated final report to council, this development application will be further evaluated for compliance with the Planning Act as amended, consistency with the provincial policy statement and conformity to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe as amended, and conformity to the in effect Region of Peel official plan, the City of Brampton official plan, and its downtown Brampton secondary plan. Next slide, please. The subject site for the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment is designated Central Area in the City of Brampton's official plan, which permits a range of freestanding or mixed-use development that include a range of office, retail, and service activities, residential uses, entertainment and cultural uses, institutional uses, high-density employment, and major transit infrastructure. The proposed development does require an amendment to the official plan. Next slide, please. On November 1st, 2023, Brampton Council adopted the City of Brampton's new official plan, Brampton Plan. The official plan provides clear direction and principles to guide city building, attaining its vision for the future in support of the city to become a vibrant urban city of over 1 million people by 2051. The council adopted official plan is currently with the region for review and approval, as the region remains the approval authority for local official plan amendments. The subject site for the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment is designated mixed use within Schedule 2 designations of the Brampton Plan and community area within Schedule 1A city structure of the Brampton Plan. Next slide, please. The lands are within the downtown Brampton secondary plan and are designated as medium, high, and high density. An amendment to the secondary plan is required to permit the proposed development. Next slide, please. The lands are zoned Residential Permit A, Special Section 3051. Land use permissions include medium-density residential uses and other accessory uses. An amendment to the zoning bylaw is required to facilitate the proposed development, and as such, next slide, please. The applicant proposes to amend the zoning bylaw from the current Residential Permit A, Special Section 3051 zone to Residential Permit A with a special section. Highlights of the proposed zone include a maximum building height of 39 stories, maximum lot coverage that shall not apply, a minimum landscaped open space of 30%, a maximum gross floor area and residential gross floor area that shall not apply, a minimum front yard depth of 3.5 meters, a minimum front yard depth to a patio of 1.5 meters, a minimum side yard width of 7.0 meters, and a minimum rear yard depth of 7.5 meters. Next slide, please. At this time, preliminary issues and considerations that will need to be addressed include land use compatibility. The subject property is located adjacent to the Brampton Go primary major transit station area, where intensification is planned to occur. Staff are looking to ensure that new buildings are compatible with the existing neighborhood context while also considering future intensification. Staff are also looking to ensure that impacts to the existing residential uses are minimized, including shadow impacts, wind impacts, privacy, and traffic. Building height separation and setbacks. Staff are looking to ensure appropriate height, tower separation, and building setbacks are implemented through the zoning bylaw amendment process. And tertiary plan. Staff are looking to ensure the redevelopment potential of neighboring parcels within the block are not impacted by the proposed development. These issues and others will be addressed in a future recommendation report. Next slide, please. Staff is hosting a statutory public meeting this evening to share information of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application on the subject site and provide an opportunity for members of the public to express comments, perspectives, and opinions. Staff will continue to review the applicant's planning rationale and supporting plans, drawings, and technical comments, and staff will advance a final recommendation report for council decision in the future based on the details of the proposed development and applicable planning laws and policies, while incorporating comments and considerations from community members, technical reviewers, and other stakeholders. Staff will also follow up with any members of the public and other stakeholders who have spoken, written in, or advised of an interest in monitoring this proposal. Next slide, please. For more information on the development proposal, the applicant's submission materials, including architectural plans, drawings, and supporting studies, these are all publicly accessible through the city's Brand Plan online portal. Just type the file number of the application in the required field, which in this case is OZS-2024-0002. This brings up the file page where by clicking the File Info tab, you will be allowed to view all drawings and documents associated with this development application. Next slide, please. This public meeting presentation will be available online as part of the Planning and Development Committee meeting minutes shortly. The final recommendation report will be posted on the city's PDC meeting agenda in advance of the future meeting. For any questions or comments about this development application, please contact myself, my manager, or the applicant, Catherine McEwen, who is representing Corsiac Planning. The corresponding contact info is shown on the screen. Next slide, please. Thank you and have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Samantha. We'll go to our delegations for the application to amend the official plan zoning bylaw Corsiac Planning, Ash Sing 123, 125, Railroad Street, Ward 1. And our only Brampton resident delegation at this time is Laura Bowman. Laura, welcome. Laura, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I have some slides. Can you bring them up? Okay, next slide. Hi, I'm a resident at 120 Railroad, which is a townhouse development on the other side of the existing apartment building from this development. Next slide, please. And for one of these slides, I will be wearing the hat as president of that condominium unit, but for the remainder of the comments are my own. So I just wanted to highlight for the Planning and Development Committee that the process for this public meeting was not ideal by any stretch. We received notice 1 day before our comments and delegation deadline occurred on the Thursday before the long weekend. And of course, now we're having this public meeting on Eclipse Day. So, and none of the apartment buildings, which are most of the surrounding residences, had notices posted in their lobby, and I spoke to a number of different residents of the apartment buildings. So the majority of the residents around this development did not get notice of this public meeting, and that's why probably I'm the only one here, at least who made the deadline. Next slide, please. So since July, I've been asking staff a number of questions about this development since the official plan sign was posted on Haggard Avenue. And I just note that the sign was posted in a difficult to view location on the opposite side from the sidewalk and not on Railroad Street. I was told by staff that a tertiary plan and a meeting for a tertiary plan would happen first before this public meeting, and that's not what happened. We never got a public meeting for the tertiary plan. And you know, you have to consider that most of the people who live around this development are new immigrants living in these apartment buildings who maybe are not familiar with the process from that official plan. And it's been really disappointing to me the lack of engagement from council and from staff with the community about this development. Next slide. For this slide, I'm wearing my hat as the board member at the condo development, which is 51 units of townhouses. Our private sewer line is potentially impacted by the underground parking garage for this development. We're within the 75-meter zone that the hydrogeologist identified as causing settling of adjacent sewer infrastructure. And we asked staff to have the hydrogeology report peer-reviewed to make sure that the proposed mitigation measures would not cause damage to our sewer pipeline. And we still have no answer from staff about whether or not that will occur. So and this could also affect the city sewer infrastructure. So surely we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Next slide. And as the neighborhood grows, we have a few strip malls with some groceries and bakeries and things like that around us. They're all have proposed developments highlighted for them. And this development doesn't add any ground floor commercial space to replace the ones that we'll be losing as the neighborhood grows and densifies. I feel strongly that you know, if you're going to build this size of development, there needs to be some ground floor servicing, grocery, daycare, that kind of thing at the ground floor level. Next slide. The area schools have overcrowding issues. It's not clear where this large number of units are going to go to school with 39 stories, over 500 units. We have frequent internet outages because the cable infrastructure in our neighborhood is already not adequate to provide internet service to the existing residents. So who's going to pay for that upgrade? How's that upgrade going to happen? I was really hoping that the tertiary plan would deal with some of these issues, but the quote-unquote tertiary plan appended to this application is just a map that redevelops all the parking lots as unknown density towers in that 1 square block. It doesn't deal with the other proposed tower on the other side of the street. So what we really need is a tertiary plan that addresses the sewer infrastructure issue, the internet infrastructure issue, some of these other issues around if we're going to redevelop all of those parking lots and some of the other adjacent properties, how are we going to properly service them in a timely fashion? Next slide. Sorry, I can't see the clock.
You're out of time. I'll give you 30 more seconds.
Okay. The main concern is really the underground parking garage because there's the soil problems that the hydrogeologist identified. Right now, we already have excess parking in the area of a number of half-empty parking lots. If this is being justified as a transit-oriented development and very high density for that reason, then it should be fully transit-oriented, and the parking requirements should be waived or kept to a minimum. And since I'm out of time, I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much for your delegation. Our next delegation is Catherine McEwen. Catherine? Welcome, Catherine. You have 5 minutes.
Good evening, Chair, members of Council, and staff. My name is Catherine McEwen from Corsiac Urban Planning, here on behalf of the owner of the subject lands. I'd like to thank Ms. De La Pena for her presentation, and I'd just like to take a few moments to highlight some additional features of the development. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the development proposal is for the surface parking lot area of 123 and 125 Railroad Street, as shown on the air photo. The development site has an area of about 0.6 hectares or 1.5 acres and will have its frontage and access onto Haggard Avenue North. Next slide, please. In response to the severe shortage of housing and high housing costs, the province enacted legislation which sets out a target of building 1.5 million homes in Ontario. The legislation sets out a clear direction to add homes to areas that are already well serviced by existing transit and community facilities, such as parks, schools, shopping. In March of last year, the City of Brampton made a pledge to the province to construct 113,000 new homes by 2031. These homes are intended to be constructed throughout the city through intensification in existing built-up areas such as this site and also new greenfield development areas. This site's exceptionally well located from a planning perspective for intensification, as it's in walking distance to the GO station. The Brampton Zoom bus routes on Queen Street and Main Street are also within easy walking distance. As mentioned, Chris Gibson Community Center and Park provide numerous recreational opportunities and are located very close to the site. And schools are within walking distance and shopping is nearby. Next slide, please. So the proposal is for a 6-story podium or base building with 33-story apartment tower on top. There's 523 units proposed, consisting of 1 bedroom plus den, 2 bedrooms, and 2 bedroom plus den units. Resident parking will be in an underground garage, 3 levels, with visitor parking on the surface. There are no changes proposed to the existing buildings at 123 and 125 Railroad Street. However, the parking for the existing buildings will also be provided in the new underground garage. Site access to the existing buildings will remain off of Railroad Street, and an additional access will be provided from Haggard Avenue. In the interim, while construction is taking place, parking for existing residents will be provided off-site. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the proposed building, which will offer a high-quality built form that will appropriately transition between the existing neighborhood. The building progresses from 4, 6, 8 stories up to 39-story heights with strong orientation to the prominent street corners and addressing street frontages. Next slide, please. The building's been strategically placed so the tallest portion is on the north side with the podium height along Haggard that will frame the public realm with an attractive streetscape at the pedestrian level while ensuring good sight lines for vehicular access points. Next slide, please. This is the overall landscape plan that illustrates the streetscape treatment will be consistent with the city's standards and enhanced planting along Haggard and naturalized planting throughout the site, which will include trees, shrubs, grasses, herbaceous perennials, which will contribute to the increasing the urban canopy. Next slide, please. The existing trees along Haggard, as well as the trees along the south property line, will remain. The landscaping between the existing buildings will be significantly enhanced and will include seating and picnic tables. And some of the other landscape features on the ground floor include seating areas, planters with seat walls, trellis, a pedestrian pathway, a pet water fountain, and a dog waste system. Next slide, please. One of the features of this building is the rooftop amenity space, which will include seating, fireplace, barbecue, as well as an extensive green roof that will also contribute to tree canopy coverage. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your delegation, Councilor. So now I will open up to the floor if there's anybody else that would like to come down and delegate on this item. We have a book there if you can sign in. And then come on to the front, state your name. He'll go, and then if you can sign your name, put your name in after. Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
I'd like to echo some of...
state your name for the record.
Oh, my name is Sushil Taylor.
Thank you.
And I've been a resident of Brampton for about 25 years now. I'd like to echo some of what Laura said. She brought up some very good points. I mean, if we are to... The biggest problem with the housing crisis is just that you have to think of the demand for housing as being locked away in the basements of, you know, Brampton's slumlords, unfortunately. But what that means is once you build a tower, chances are they're probably going to move in there, especially the folks that can afford it, whether to buy or rent. But one thing I noticed is that that neighborhood, this specific building, is not very walkable. I've driven through that neighborhood so many times. It's got a lot of apartment complexes, and I think it is really important to have ground floor retail of some sort, because I mean, if we are going to have a major transit station area, and there is such a lack of housing, the automatic market response is going to be nothing but pure housing and like practically no ground floor retail. I'm not a fan of government regulation for a lot of these things, but the reality is that we're going to end up with a whole MTSA neighborhood without, you know, places to walk to, right? If you replace this parking lot and you don't have ground floor retail, the closest retail is on the downtown Brampton stretch, or that little box building beside the GO station, or you have to walk to McLaughlin and Queen, right, on that plaza. And then there's some, you know, retail scattered throughout the little tiny homes on Queen Street. But that doesn't, that's not, you know, like if there's no grocery store at the bottom, right, you're gonna have to drive to that one, right? It doesn't have to be as big as that one, but like, you know what I mean, right? People, the benefit of living in a condo complex, a walkable neighborhood, if you're replacing a parking lot, is having ground floor retail. The beauty of having a mall on the bottom is excellent. Doesn't have to be every building, but we really should be mindful, and we can look at this neighborhood as an example. It's all residential anyway. You already have a lot of density to begin with, right? If you add ground floor residential, that's gonna be served by the existing community. And it's gonna make that community walkable, because right now, if you wanna go anywhere in that community, you do have to drive. Because the only thing that stops a community from being walkable is whether or not you have a business in your neighborhood to walk to, right? You can make single detached home neighborhoods walkable by allowing some small scale retail. Same goes here, right? Having ground floor retail would be excellent. It would make that whole neighborhood walkable. But also, as we're thinking about the future of building out that area, we should consider, that mixed density, because not all of these, units are going to be torn down. Like, some of these apartment buildings are going to remain. A lot of these homes are going to remain still, probably, right? But what about the people living in the new buildings? If we want to have a walkable transit-oriented neighborhood, we have to consider ground floor retail, I believe. And I think that would be an excellent way to build out the downtown core.
Thank you for your delegation. Please state your name for the record.
Helen Nissen. I won't even take 5 minutes because I wasn't prepared to say anything. I live in one of the buildings, the 125 Railroad, and my primary concern is for the parking availability. Once this building, if it goes through, what will happen to the residents? We have 2 6-story buildings, about 144, 45 apartments, suites in both of them. And we had, about 3 years ago, I believe, they paved the parking lot, and we had to park on the street. It was a nightmare. It was 2 weeks. It was a nightmare. We were in the park next door to us. We were all the way down the street. Some of us had to park even further down. I don't know how they can come up with a solution for that, especially for building such a huge apartment that's going to take a number of years. It's going to be a huge inconvenience for everybody, not to mention the eyesore of a huge 40-story building facing the townhomes right behind, the townhomes on the other side, the amount of traffic that will be generated from that build, and a lot of the points that the folks made here about that other building going up, that's a ditto for this one. So my main concern is the parking. I don't believe that they can find a solution, and I don't feel like coming home at 9, 10 and parking, 10 blocks away. That's not fair for the residents. So that's just my main concern. I don't think it's a good idea to build such a huge building like that, but that's it.
Thank you for your delegation.
Okay, thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
Oh, my name's Leslie Booker. I'm at 7 Rossett Crescent. I bought there about 17 years ago. I've been in Brampton 60 years, off Bartley Bull area. And I'm really, really concerned about this building going up. My backyard faces Haggart, so we'll be facing that building. We have a small backyard, but I've made it kind of like my little haven. Lots of trees. Thank goodness I have those. And the thought of, there's so many birds in our neighborhood. We have squirrels. We have people out walking their pets. It's a community. We all care about each other, and it's warm. And I don't know, growing up in Brampton, to me, it'd be like putting these big buildings around Bartley Bull Parkway. It's absolutely ridiculous that something this big and an eyesore, as you said, would be put up. I understand people need housing, but, I don't know why townhomes or something else could not go in there that would be more appealing to our neighborhood, because that's our neighborhood. We've all been there for years, especially at Rossett. We're a little townhouse complex, so we'll be facing. It's just very upset. I didn't know that we would be speaking today. I just assumed from the letter that we would be here to hear about what was happening, because nobody really prepared anything, because we just thought it was more of an informational meeting, because I had no idea what was going up. And I would have been more prepared, and I know other people would have come to speak about it. Do you know why we weren't told that?
So this is, these applications are for the public. You can delegate to public anytime you want on
Okay.
any applications, but maybe I'll kick it over to Alan. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Exactly that. Through the processing of this application, which will occur over the next several months, likely more, staff are happy to hear from any residents, individuals, landowners, residents, about the thoughts that they might have to want to share with staff about the application. Any insights, questions, concerns. Within a future recommendation report, staff will be responding back to all of those questions that we've received and posing additional details in relation to the studies and the different sort of topics that have been brought up through the public consultation.
Thank you. I just ask, you know, anybody who has a home would not feel good about a big 40-story building going up in their backyard. I don't know anyone that would say, yay, this is great. I can't believe how crowded Brampton is and how bad the driving is. We've got one each way road at Haggart. Where are all these people gonna go? And the doors opening and closing to the garage and the fumes from their cars. Like, I'm shocked that anyone would even want to put something in there. I've got so many reasons why, but off the top of my head, when I think of the traffic, you know, when I try to get out of Brampton and I go down where the GO train is, sometimes I'm backed up for 10 minutes, you know, just to get my car through over to Queen Street. It's crazy. Like, where are all these people gonna go? You know, I'm shocked, but I'll definitely be sending in more information about how I'm feeling. I just am not prepared.
No problem. Thank you very much for your delegation. Welcome. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Jillian Olahan, 76 McMurtry Avenue North. I sit smack dab in the middle of the development from Park Street and on Haggard Avenue. And, you know, I think I pretty much said how I'm feeling about the developers moving into the neighborhood. But secondary to that, I don't think the neighbors can really satisfy the capacity of traffic that will be moving through these neighborhoods. They are single roads, like Leslie said, and the clip some cars are going through there right now, it's not sustainable. It's just asking for an accident to happen, especially when you're going around Railroad. So now you're introducing 500 or more units on both sides and you're going traffic east-west. That's a lot of extra cars on the road. So I would ask council to really consider the impact of the increased traffic on the roads and side streets. When the developments were going up on Mill Street, I had concrete trucks parked outside my house. And delivery trucks trying to go around Railroad, that bend there, which is lots of fun on a good day, but even worse when you're driving a tractor trailer. So I really want people to be very much aware that although these developments are happening or potentially could happen on Haggard, on Park, every single street on either side of that are going to be impacted by the traffic, the congestion, the noise, dust, etc. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Come on. Just state your name for the record.
Matthew Smatis, 86 West Street. Continuing on with what was said before, the amount of traffic in that area is phenomenal, especially where if there's that curve that comes around from Railroad down when they were repaving that, coming either north or east on that, it was extremely dangerous because it was making it a blind curve. The other question I have too is I compliment the developers on their great artistic drawings, and it makes everything very beautiful with the trees that they want to plant and everything else. But what they also don't talk about is the impact to the schools. When 45 was built, our children were in grades 4 and 2, and they were forced to move from their school across the street to one that was over 2 kilometers away. They weren't available for busing, and they had to cross 2 major streets. Now with traffic being even more, it's very dangerous for children to walk to school today. None of the developers have really talked about what impact that is going to do to the surrounding areas and what they're going to do to ensure that these things are taken care of, and that's my other concern. By the time, like, my children were dispersed, by the time that 45 Railroad was occupied, My kids were almost out of high school. So I want to make sure that the city is looking at everything and really keeping track of bringing with this many potential buildings coming to that area. What are they going to do for schools, infrastructure, and beyond for traffic? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions and delegations. As staff said, all comments tonight will be captured within the staff report. Once the staff report comes back, everybody here that has delegated on this item will also be notified of that staff report coming back to planning committee for that application, so that everybody knows that. With that, I don't see anybody else that would like to delegate on this item. And I'll have Councillor Vincente move receipt of the item 5.4, 11.1, the correspondence, and the delegation 6.2. All in favor? That carries. Our next item is delegation from Sylvia Roberts on the MTSA.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Roberts. I've gone through the report. Generally, I'm pretty strongly in favor of it. The unlimited height and density, when it was implemented and proposed by staff, it made sense and perfectly matched the situation on the ground, the legal realities, and it does make sense, especially given that at this point, let's be honest, 60 stories is literally, these are literally skyscrapers being proposed, and with the number attempting to provide servicing and all that stuff is a significant difficulty. So overall, I very much agree with the generally revoking the unlimited height and density, because for having 60 stories now, 2 years from now, we can get 80-story buildings. That's too difficult to plan for, because the lead time with the region appeal for water mains and all that stuff, quite difficult. I did notice that they decided to use the old VMC thing. One thing that council needs to consider is Vaughan is currently redoing its plan for VMC, and their current proposed plan from staff is doubling the population capacity. And the reason for that is because that planning that staff is using as a reference model is based on significantly out-of-date population data, and it's not appropriate for Brampton. The problem is that is the most appropriate reference because there is simply anything like that in Brampton. I have looked in the GTA, I've looked across Ontario, I've looked across Canada, I've looked at other places in the US, and frankly, there simply aren't any comparators. But it's the trying to step it back that far to potentially 25 to 40. It does make sense to stick more to a straight wall of, say, 40 stories, but when we are talking about larger units, which it does mention because the applications coming forward are overwhelmingly 1 and 2 bedroom units, what needs to be understood is a lot of this is financial constraints imposed by the floor plate that the city of Brampton has loved to impose. I know Vancouver put it in place to protect their mountains and ocean views, and then Toronto copied and a bunch of other cities copied it, and we just don't have the mountain and the ocean views to protect. We also don't have other specific constraints. So for example, Hamilton has views of the mountain they want to protect. We do not have the Niagara Escarpment. So there's a lot of considerations that when we just say, oh, this other municipality is doing it, we should use this as a reference. We need to understand why other municipalities did it to be able to properly apply it to the situation. There is a number of places where higher density than 25-story does make sense outside of MTSAs, and I'm sure those will come up as part of the secondary plans. But overall, it's the removing unlimited height and density makes sense, but the proposal in the table may be lower than what is appropriate for that. So I just wanted to make sure the council is considering that, and that staff basically has to come up with a plan without any meaningful precedent anywhere, because there's no precedent in Ontario, there's no precedent in the rest of Canada, there's no precedent in North America, and everywhere else has two different planning jurisdiction to be comparable. Thank you. That's my delegation.
Thank you for your delegation. Just to let members of council know, I got ahead of myself. When we get to 7.7, I'm going to reopen the agenda, pull that from consent, put a little amendment on that one that we will actually highlight too when it goes to Steve, when this goes to committee, just because I shouldn't have allowed it into consent. Whoever was here for that has left. It wasn't public meeting, but it was the application. So we'll highlight that at minutes, and I'll pull it again just to make sure. But anyways, going back to the agenda, 7.1, the staff presentation, proposed modifications to Brampton Plan Major Transit Area. Receipt of the delegation moved by Councillor Power. All in favor, that carries. Michelle Gervais is here for the staff presentation. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members, staff, and the public that are watching this evening. My name is Michelle Gervais, and I am a policy planner with the City Planning Division, Integrated City Planning Division. I'm one of the project leads on Brampton's Major Transit Station Area Study. The purpose of this presentation this evening is to present proposed modifications to the height and density MTSA policies that are included in the council-adopted Brampton Plan that we are seeking council endorsement of. I will be referring to major transit station areas as MTSAs, short form, throughout my presentation. Next slide, please.
One more.
So prior to discussing the proposed modifications on the MTSA policies, I will provide a brief overview and background of some previous decisions that council made in 2022 with respect to unlimited height and density in a portion of the Brampton's Urban Growth Center. Also touch on some of the background with respect to how we derived at the MTSA policies in the council-adopted Brampton Plan, and also a brief discussion on some recent legislation that's been passed by the province. We have both the Bill 150, the Official Plan Adjustments Act, and there's also a Bill 162, Get It Done Act, which is in the second reading but hasn't been passed by legislation yet. So next slide, please. So in 2021, staff was directed to evaluate the merits of implementing unlimited height and density in portions of Brampton. And in September of 2022, staff prepared a recommendation report that council endorsed, and that directed staff to hold a public meeting to implement unlimited height and density in a portion of the urban growth center between Center Street and Highway 410. So staff was directed to have a public meeting with respect to that. And the implementing tools, specifically the zoning bylaw, would be subject to the implementation of a holding provision based on the completion of a number of technical studies that would be required, such as servicing, growth management, shadowing, wind studies, that would have to be proved before any permissions for unlimited height and density. So about the same time at the end of 2022, staff was working on the draft city structure as part of our new official plan, the Brampton Plan, and it was also the start of Brampton's MTSA study. And for the area where staff was directed to look at implementing unlimited height and density, that includes three primary MTSAs within those boundaries, the Center, Kennedy, and Rutherford MTSAs. So based on the city starting their work on their city structure and the commencement of the Brampton's MTSA study, it was felt that it'd be more appropriate to look at height and density once the city structure was formalized, and also through the review of the MTSA study, as under the Planning Act, we're required to look at minimum densities for MTSAs. So next slide, please. This slide here just shows a few points on how we got to the approval of Brampton Plan back in November of 2023. So starts off with the approval of the regional official plan, which was approved with modifications by the province in November 2022. So specifically to deal with MTSAs, the Region Appeal Official Plan provides policies and delineates and classifies MTSAs, sets out minimum density targets and policies for the local municipalities to undertake detailed city land use planning for their MTSAs. There was a policy included in the Region Appeal Official Plan at the time of adoption by the region that allowed local municipalities at their discretion to impose maximum building heights and densities. However, when the official plan was forwarded to the province for final approval, they did modify and remove that policy. They struck it out, so there was no longer that policy in effect in the Region Appeal Official Plan to allow for those local municipalities to impose those restrictions on height and density. After the region's official plan was approved, our planning study was underway for our MTSAs. Brampton Council approved an official plan amendment in May of 2023, which delineated protected MTSAs, established minimum density targets, and also provided some guiding policies to deal with planning applications that were being submitted prior to Brampton Plan coming into effect. So again, in February and in May of 2023, 2 letters were issued by the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing at the time, which those letters were submitted or directed to both former Mayor Bonnie Crombie, Mayor of Mississauga, and also the Peel Regional Chair. And those letters specifically highlighted again the province's modifications that they made to the Region Appeals Official Plan, saying that any local municipalities, you're not allowed to be imposing any maximum heights and densities, as the province struck that out when they approved the Region Appeals Official Plan. So those were 2 letters that we received in early 2023. So based on the understanding that in our Brampton Plan, we wouldn't be able to impose maximum heights and densities in MTSAs, we still looked at, through our MTSA study, the character of the areas, and also with the understanding of where the city structure is heading and where we want to focus our growth. We proposed different various land use designations, including both low, mid, and high-rise on our MTSA land use schedules, and also policies to encourage the highest intensity and growth to be situated in our urban centers, along the corridors, and directly adjacent to the transit stations. So that's reflective in the MTSA land use schedules that were included in Brampton Plan that was adopted by Council on November 1st of 2023. Although we couldn't have specific schedules at the time to identify those maximums, we described as best those objectives in policies. And sorry, just one thing I forgot to highlight was that the official plan amendment that was brought forward back in May of 2023, it was appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So I forgot to make note of that. So also, next slide, please. Some other useful background information with respect to the modifications that we're presenting tonight is Bill 150, which was passed by Ontario legislature on December 5th. The purpose of that bill was to wind back certain provincial changes, modifications that the province made to a number of official plans in various municipalities in Ontario. And the province has indicated that these decisions were done without sufficient transparency, and that they want to reinforce that public trust. So one of the modifications that the province did reinstate was that policy in the Region Appeal official plan that was removed when they approved the region's plan to allow local municipalities to impose the maximum height and density restrictions. So that policy was reinstated through Bill 51, so the municipalities in the Region Appeal now at their discretion can implement maximum heights and densities according to Bill 150. And just quickly as a highlight, Bill 162, the Get It Done Act, it intends to repeal the Bill 150. I'm not 100% sure of all the modifications at this time that it is proposing to repeal, but based on conversations with the Region Appeal, the policy to allow municipalities to impose maximum heights is still on the table. And as I mentioned, that one hasn't received any final passing yet, so that's just in the second reading. So next slide, please. So where do we go from here? We have previous council decisions on implementing unlimited height and density in a portion of the urban growth center. As I said, those decisions were made before Brampton Plan was adopted by City Council and the new city structure. We have the council adopted Brampton Plan back in November of 2023. We have the Bill 150 Act that has passed in the legislature in December, and we have the forthcoming approval of our official plan, Brampton Plan, by Regional Council upcoming in the next month. So next slide, please. So I think it's important to go back and look at the Brampton Plan and the city structure that council has adopted. On the screen here, you'll see Schedule 1A, which is city structure, taken right from Brampton Plan. So the city structure demonstrates how and where growth will occur. Most of Brampton's growth is to occur within centers, in MTSAs and along the boulevards. But specifically, the most intense growth is to occur in our urban centers. So those are shown as the red circles on the city structure map, and those are around downtown, around the Bramalea City Center, and in Uptown. So that's where the highest intensity is to be focused. The next level of intensity is the town centers, and again, shown on the screen here on the city structure, those are shown in yellow circles, if you can see them on there, and those are around the MTSA situated at Bramalea Go, Mount Pleasant Go, and around the Mississauga at Steeles MTSA. So the intensity within the town centers is to be less than the ones in the urban centers, so in the red areas. The next sort of level of growth is our MTSAs, which are situated also along the primary and secondary urban boulevards, and the language directly from Brampton Plan is that the highest intensity along those corridors is to be directly adjacent to the transit station or stop, and densities in those locations have to be lower than those in the centers. So next slide, please. So I think based on the city structure and the objectives, the MTSA objectives and Brampton Plan reflect those of the overall city structure, and that's concentrating the highest intensity adjacent to the transit station and stop, and as you move away from that transit station and stop, the intensity should be lower. And also looking at providing appropriate transitions in height adjacent to established low-density residential areas and other land uses within the MTSAs. Because it's important to note that MTSAs are not just the lands directly around a transit station. They encompass a larger area specifically about 500 to 800 meters around the transit station stop, and is considered to be about a 10-minute walking distance. So next slide, please. So staff is recommending some modifications to the Brampton Plan MTSA policies, and that's to deliver on the city structure that I just discussed, and also the MTSA policy objectives, and also in accordance with Bill 150, which does give us the direction to do so. So we are proposing, as part of our staff recommendation report considered on the agenda tonight, that we amend specific policies in Chapter 4 of Brampton Plan under the height and density sections. And that will allow staff to propose specific building heights and densities and locations for unlimited height and densities within MTSAs in specific locations through the next phase of our work, which is the precinct plan and secondary plan amendment stage. So we aren't asking for specific height limitations through this modification tonight. It's just amended wording in Brampton Plan to allow us to do that at a future date. Next slide, please. So what does Brampton want to achieve by regulating height and density? I briefly described, that MTSAs are not necessarily just the lands, the four corners immediately adjacent to the transit station stop, but they actually comprise of approximately 1,000 hectares of land across the city. So thinking about that, we have the interest in regulating height and density, and some of the points are here on the screen, and one is sort of providing a diversity in design. We want to ensure that the various land use designations that are on Brampton Plan and our MTSA schedules can be achieved. So that's being able to achieve a variety of built form from low density all the way to high density. The next is generate placemaking activity at grade level. Look at creating sort of human scale environments. If we have a monoculture, a monotonous wall of tall buildings, may not necessarily be a desirable place for people to gather at grade level. There could be wind effects, shadowing, collection of pollutants, just from a social environmental perspective. We want to be able to generate more activity at the grade level, and that may not be accomplished with having just all tall buildings. As I've mentioned a number of times in the presentation, we want to encourage a variety of housing topologies. And one of the most important things is we want to be able to appropriately plan for infrastructure and community services. And based on the work that we've undertaken so far through our MTSA study, we have heard from the Region of Peel that most of the MTSAs, there isn't the sanitary sewer capacity to service the densities that we're seeing within some of these MTSAs. And we've provided information to the region to help with some of our technical work on infrastructure within MTSAs. And the densities that we've proposed were fairly modest and conservative, and were based on the various land use schedules. And even based on that, they've indicated that there is a problem from a servicing perspective. So I think it's important to be able to give that level of certainty to the region, for staff, and even for the development industry, with having some regulations on height and density. So next slide, please. So subject to council's approval of the revised language that we're seeking to be approved to give us that direction to look at imposing specific maximum heights. As indicated, we would be providing that more level of detail through the future next phase, which is our precinct plan and secondary plan stage. So what we would be proposing is utilizing the existing building topologies, height ranges that are currently in the council-adopted Brampton Plan for lands that are designated low-rise plus, and mid-rise to the various land use designations shown on the MTSA land use schedules. So just a quick recap on that. Low-rise is up to 3 stories. Low-rise plus is 4 stories, and mid-rise is 5 to 12 stories. And for lands that are designated high-rise on the MTSA land use schedules, we are proposing unlimited height and density to be permitted on the properties that are directly adjacent to the high-order transit station and stop, and also at the Highway 410 and Queen Street intersection. We do realize that some of the GO stations have varying sort of characteristics versus some of the other MTSAs, so the locations for unlimited height and density may not be directly adjacent to the station. So we still, through our next phase of work, we'll be looking at that into a little bit more detail. And all the other high-rise mixed-use designations would be subject to a maximum height and density based on location. And what we were thinking on that is the high-rise designations that are located mid-block, so essentially along the primary transit corridor between two stations, have a height range between 25 to 40 stories, and all other high-rise designations would be between 13 to 25 stories. And just want to point out that any sites that have existing zoning permissions beyond the ranges that we may be proposing, that those existing zoning permissions would remain. And one other point on the screen here is that we understand that there may be circumstances for additional height and density beyond those that we may establish in the future precinct plan and secondary plans. And that specific criteria for considering that additional height and density will be included as part of those amendments. Next slide, please. We are also requesting one minor modification to one of the MTSA land use schedules that was approved as part of Brampton Plan, and that's the Mount Pleasant GO MTSA land use schedule. Currently, the land use schedule shows the lands north of Beauvert and west of Credit View Road as neighborhood low-rise residential. After Brampton Plan was approved, we were going back through the existing zoning permissions, and those specific lands have zoning permissions for stacked townhouses with a 4.5-story permission for maximum building height, which if we round up, that falls within the mid-rise building topology range in Brampton Plan. So we are proposing to change that from a neighborhood low-rise residential to a neighborhood mid-rise to reflect existing zoning permissions. So, next slide, please. So with respect to next steps in our Brampton MTSA study, we are going to be holding 2 open house meetings. First one will be May 14th, and the second one would be May 23rd. We will present the highlights of the next phase of our process, and that would be an overview of the official plan amendments, precinct plan and secondary plans, and depending on the approval or not approval of council for our proposed modifications to the height and density policies, if approved, we will be showing those specific schedules that would outline the maximum heights and densities at those open house meetings. And over the summer months, we will look at addressing any comments that we receive, continue to work on our study, and present the draft precinct plan and secondary plan amendments at a statutory public meeting in September, with the goal of council adoption of those amendments in November of 2024. And just before I conclude my presentation, Mr. Chairman, we did receive a number of correspondence related to our items tonight, and I think summary, there was a few issues that were raised in there, and one is that limiting heights and densities will preclude us from meeting the density targets. But we don't feel that that's the case. We will, based on the heights and densities that we look at implementing, like the specifics, we will ensure that our minimum densities targets are met for our MTSAs. And based on the preliminary work that we've done up till now, that I had mentioned before, where we have been implementing certain heights and densities, some of the MTSAs were 2 to 3 times higher than the minimum density targets, according to the province. So we don't see any obstacles with imposing maximum heights and densities to be able to achieve those minimum density targets. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Before I go to the committee members, Michelle, just ask, when are we going to the region with our Brampton plan? Do we have that date?
Mr. Chairman, through our discussions with Peel Regional Planning staff, I believe that's targeted for April 25th,
April
Regional
25th?
Council.
Okay, so for all the members at Regional Council to know, that's when our Brampton plan will need your voice if there's any issues, but we don't foresee any issues. Also, locations of open houses. We have dates. Do we have locations of where the open houses are going to be?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, both of our open houses will be in the conservatory here at City Hall, and we're just working on finalizing the details for the notification for those open house meetings. They'll be on social media. We're also doing some mobile signs around the city to advertise for those open houses. So we will be splitting them up by geographical areas. The first night, May 14th, I think we're focusing the MTSAs along the Queen Street corridor, and the remaining ones would be on the May 24th date.
Okay, thank you. Any members of committee have any questions? Nobody online? I'm not doing quorum check. Then the report presented by Michelle Gervais, Brampton Plan, Major Transit Station Area Policies, items 7.1 and 7.2. Be moved by Councillor Power. All in favor? That carries. Next, now I have to reopen the agenda for 7.7. I will move that. All in favor? That carries. The agenda is now open. Item 7.7, staff report, application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, Glenschnar and Associates, 13514-161, Canada Inc., 8654 Mississauga Road, Ward 6. There was just in discussions with city staff, Regional Appeal residents, having this access right onto Mississauga Road, I think is not the best of ideas. It's a dangerous part of Mississauga Road, right on the peak of a hill. So in discussions with now the owner of the north side, the former, still current Terrace on the Green, they're looking for something. We own the property to the west of this. I'd like to direct staff to work with the applicant Community Services to explore access to the proposal through a proposed road facilitated by the access easement over the city-owned lands. I think we take 3 to 4 weeks to have that kind of discussion with also the landowners.
Through the chair, at the will of council, certainly this is something we could take back and work with community services, other internal groups, and the landowner fairly quickly. So we bring it back prior to enactment of the zoning bylaw coming before council.
Excellent. Okay. And just to facilitate an access easement over the city-owned lands. Perfect. Happy to move that. All in favor? Carries. I moved it. Okay, let me catch up here. 9.1, added item, staff presentation. Updates to the Brampton plan. Henrik is here.
Good
to
evening,
provide
Chair,
a
members of the
presentation.
committee, members of the public, and staff colleagues. I will keep it brief.
Okay.
I think you probably heard a few of the items alluded to already tonight. I'm just here on behalf of the team in my integrated city planning that have been working on Brampton Plan, just to give you a bit of a synopsis of what's happened since council adopted Brampton Plan back in November. Next slide, please. So as you're aware, on November 1st, Council adopted Brampton Plan, following which city staff worked with the region to submit the plan and supporting materials in order to the region of Peel, in order for them to be able to commence their review, since the region is the approval authority under the Planning Act. So between November 27th, I think, was the first submission of materials to the region. There was a bit of back and forth. There was subsequent submissions in December, throughout December, so that finally by January 19th, the region finally issued that notice of a complete submission and commenced the 120-day time period within which the region would then be required to issue a decision, again in accordance with the Planning Act. Over that period, city staff have continued to work with the region to address any questions and to respond to input and direction by the region. And this is kind of essentially the stage that we're at right now. Following Peel's review, the deadline for the region to issue that decision at 120 days falls on May 16th. As was mentioned, though, region staff is bringing their recommendation report to Regional Council on April the 25th. Next slide, please. So through the region's review of Brampton Plan, they proposed a few modifications to bring it into conformity with the regional OP. Just very briefly in terms of the nature of these commentaries, the majority of them, the modifications are minor in nature. They include things such as adding language that links city OP policies to regional OP policies, adding new policies or wording as required through the regional OP, removing redundant repetitive policies, modifications to clarify language and to maintain the city's intent of those policies, and adding definitions to the glossary as needed, just again to improve the reading experience and to conform to the regional OP definitions. Next slide, please. So the city and the region have also been responding to comments from the public, stakeholders and landowners as part of that regional review process. In particular, I guess in response to CANF's comment letters, which were received during the commenting period of Brampton Plan, and again during the region's review process, modifications have been proposed to the Mississauga Road Corridor Special Policy Area. These proposed modifications would allow warehousing as a permitted use where it was not permitted previously, so long as it is secondary to major office uses and is compatible with the prestige business vision for the area. The proposed policy language is listed on the slide here in front of you. I'll just read it out. Warehousing, secondary in function to the intended major office development, and compatible, consistent, and complementary with the business environment and vision for this area. The other addition, I think Michelle Gervais has done a commendable job speaking to it, so I won't go into any further detail on that. Next slide. And then the last set of adjustments are just some modifications proposed on the map and the schedules. Again, this includes revisions to reflect conformity with Parkway Belt West mapping, the addition of rural lands mapping to conform to the Greenbelt Plan, and then some minor areas to revise and to conform to regional schedules and approved OPAs. Next slide. So just to recap, moving forward, the next steps in the process are, as I mentioned on the 25th, regional staff bringing a recommendation to Regional Council for approval of Brampton Plan. Following that recommendation, May 16th still sits as the final deadline for the region of Peel to issue a decision. And then moving forward from there, Brampton Plan would come officially into effect and would also include our continuing to move on with the development and implementation of a comprehensive zoning bylaw, which we intend to complete by the second quarter of 2025. And I believe I have some members of my staff on hand if the chair or members have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Henrik. I'll go straight to committee members to see if there's any committee members. No questions. Great job. Steve, you really want, go ahead, Steve.
Just if I
Commissioner.
could, first of all, I just want to commend both Michelle and Henrik for going through what I believe is a fairly exhaustive review of recent provincial legislative changes so that Brampton continues to be up to date with the latest and greatest coming from Queen's Park. But secondly, if I could just ask the clerk to go back to slide 4 on Henrik's presentation. I only just want to, again, highlight the fact that the warehousing is not intended to be a primary use at all. It is not really just to be complementary to the prestige industrial office vision that was always contemplated by council and certainly staff. And I just bring this for the committee's consideration because it's my understanding that there may be a delegation at Wednesday's committee of council meeting and potentially Thursday's regional council meeting from MDA on this particular proposed policy change.
Thank you, Steve. And Steve, I add to your comments, two unbelievable Brampton employees with unbelievable teams backing them for the amount of work that's gone into both of these. We know how hard it is and how much work everything goes into, and I can just see by the staff that are just in this room now. Unbelievable. Congratulations, and thank you so much for all the work that you've all put into this. Happy to move it if it hasn't been moved by Councillor Power. All in favor? That carries. We'll run through there are 11.1's done, 11.2's done, 11.3 and 11.4. I think we're done at that time. Councillor question period. Are there any questions by any members of council? Seeing none, they're quiet today. Public question period. This is a time where we give the opportunity for the public to come down and ask any questions about anything on the agenda today. Sylvia Roberts.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Roberts, and so my question is, what specific metrics do you incorporate to keep track of the actual population of Brampton as estimated by Statistics Canada? Because Hempson has basically admitted in correspondence to me that they didn't, and people who were involved with previous Hempson studies, that the population estimates simply do not keep track of how many people the provincial and the federal government are bringing in. So we could run into a situation where if we're following those Hempson targets, we're actually 50,000 or more people behind, which may be living in basement apartments everywhere in the city. So it's, how is planning keeping track of the difference between that and making sure we're building housing for the people who actually live here, not the number of people that Hempson thinks might live here, given that they have a perfectly wrong track record in terms of consistently underestimating the population of Brampton.
So I'm not going to agree with you, but census is something that we use. But I'm not sure if does the crystal ball in planning department still work? Does that? 'Cause I think it used to work, but Steve.
Yeah, through the chair, through to the delegate, certainly. Time and time again, I know this council has echoed the fact that Brampton has far more population on the ground than was originally forecast. And I've just been informed by Henrik that our staff do some calibration to accommodate for the undercount that has been originally forecasted. We continue to work on that. I might suggest that certainly through the direction recently provided by council to undertake the ward boundary review, that's where we're going to need the most up-to-date data available to us, and at that time, certainly that data through the ward boundary review would be public for discussion.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you. With that, there are no other public questions, no closed session. It's been moved by Councillor Power that we adjourn tonight's meeting. Our next regular scheduled meeting is Monday, April 22nd at 7 p.m. or at the call of the chair. Thank you and good night, everybody. Great work, everyone.